Located between West and East, the Republic of Turkey links Europe to the Middle East and the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. The country also controls 2 maritime chokepoints and holds significant economic, military, and cultural influence throughout the region. However, the union between the country's capital-rich cosmopolitan western provinces and the underprivileged conservative eastern regions has shaped a duality in the geopolitical mindset of Turkey. My name is Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. In the early 2000s, Turkey devised a diplomatic plan under the phrase "policy of zero problems with our neighbors." It allowed Ankara to pursue to normalize relations with Cyprus and Armenia and mediate between Israel and Syria. But the plan also enabled Turkey to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran in partnership with Brazil, while seeking to attain important energy and construction deals with Russia. At the same time, Turkey also sought to reach a diplomatic settlement with the PKK militants. These past activities seem like a long time ago, but due to the open-minded approach to regional issues, Turkey was considered as the keystone of stability in the Middle East. At the time, the country was basically admired as an exemplary model for other Muslim-majority nations. However, the Turkish government's increasingly Islamist attitude has reversed the country's fortunes. Today, Ankara is at odds with Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, Tehran, Moscow, and even with allies in the West. It seems as if Turkey lost its way. This geopolitical transmission, however, can be traced back to the founding moment of the Republic. Modern Turkey is a fusion between the sophisticated and capital-rich Sea of Marmara and the underprivileged and conservative region of Anatolia. This contradiction in geography has altered the Turkish culture to such an extent that it's completely unrecognizable from their Ottoman brethren, who were a cosmopolitan people with a proud and confident mentality. But that world ended for the Turks in the 1920s when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the Turks were besieged from multiple fronts. The ensuing War of Independence had a devastating impact on the newly independent nation, but it wasn't just the high body counts that was shocking. The fact that so many powers had come together to take down the Turks unified the nation under the command of Mustafa Kemal, universally known as Ataturk. In the early years of independence, Ataturk introduced his 6 arrows, which included republicanism, statism, reformism, populism, nationalism, and secularism. These arrows served as the ideological core of the new Turkish Republic. A large segment of the society embraced those ideas, but an equally large portion resisted them. One group of people that was alienated in the formation of the new government were the Kurds. Although today the situation has improved significantly for the Kurds, and many of them are well integrated into the political, economic, and social life of Turkey, there is still an uneasy friction between the central government and the ethnic group. Beyond the Kurdish issue, there is an even deeper tension over religion. In the 1920s, in an effort to break from the Ottoman past and consolidate the Republic of Turkey, Ataturk moved to disassociate the newly independent country from Islam. First, in 1924, he abolished the Ottoman Caliphate, which had served as the political and religious focal point in the Sunni Muslim world. It was an enormous step towards secularization, but it wasn't enough. Turkey had to change its cultural identity, and towards that design, Ataturk instituted the use of the Gregorian calendar, European numerals, and the Latin alphabet. At the same time, the office of the Shaykh al-Islam, which had presided over religious affairs, was abolished. The same fate awaited Sufi orders, religious schools and charities, as well as clothing items such as the fez. Eventually, in 1928, Islam was removed from the constitution as the religion of the state. However, the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire had left Turkey with only the Marmara heartland and the Anatolian highlands. Thus, as Ataturk overhauled the country, and formed a fiercely secular society, capital generated in the Sea of Marmara was largely invested in Anatolia's infrastructure and education. This painstaking process gradually urbanized the eastern portion of the country. It took them several generations, but eventually the Turks made Anatolia their own. However, the merger between the wealthy western provinces and the underprivileged eastern regions created a new balance of power which had not existed during the imperial days. As the Anatolian towns and cities developed, the locals steadily entered the mainstream of Turkey's economy, bureaucracy, and military, which up until then had been dominated by the Marmara region. Large communities from Anatolia moved to Istanbul in the west, and the city's population nearly tripled in size to 2.8 million by the 1980s. Meanwhile, in the east, the economic growth and urbanization was so impressive that cities such as Denizli, Gaziantep, Kayseri, Bursa, Konya, Trabzon, and others were dubbed as the Anatolian Tigers. As Anatolia entered a period of rapid economic growth, it created tensions between the elites. A new class of entrepreneurs, industrialists, and state officials had entered the Turkish political system. The same surge applied to Islamist groups which had fused into the educational and cultural sphere, and as part of their resistance to the 6 arrows of Ataturk, the religious leaders claimed that secular values and principles were alien to the Turkish culture and inconsistent with a Muslim society. As a result, 2 competing Turkish identities emerged and developed over the course of the ensuing decades. The Marmara faction subscribed to the secular codes, while the Anatolian front adhered to Islamic values. Yet internal rivalries in Turkey were not restricted to secularists and clerics. In the 1970s, a low-level insurgency erupted between the left-wing communists and right-wing nationalists. The respective death squads inflicted some 5,000 casualties, but before long the fighting was overshadowed by the larger Kurdish separatist conflict, which is still ongoing. By the year 2000, Istanbul's population reached 8.8 million due to the influx from the eastern provinces. At the same time, Anatolian businesses and religious factions had advanced sufficiently to challenge the secularists from the Marmara region for political power. Erdogan's party, the AKP, acted as an agent for the conservative Anatolian community and embraced the Ottoman Empire's Eurosceptic and religious characteristics. This link to the religious past has allowed for the Anatolians to extend their influence throughout much of the Islamic world. As a result, Turkey holds significant soft power in the Balkans, the Caucasus, Central Asia, the Middle East, and even parts of Africa. Meanwhile, the secularist camp in the Sea of Marmara, backed by the military, wanted to pursue ties with Europe and perceived themselves as the heir to the Ottomans' martial traditions and Europhile legacy. Most of the country's trade was and still is conducted on the western side of the country, and the secularists continue to dominate the military and the judicial courts. The rivalry between Western secularists and Eastern clerics is not absolute. There are plenty of secularists in Anatolia, just as there are religious factions in the Marmara region. In fact, the AKP holds the mayoralty in Istanbul, which is now home to a staggering 15 million people. Yet the competition between the two camps has largely defined the political discourse of modern Turkey. In 2002, the AKP came to power and allowed for Turkish citizens to explore their religious identities more freely. Erdogan and his allies greatly reformed the economy. Within a short span of time, trade, agriculture, construction, banking, mining, manufacturing, and the heavy industrial sectors all surged. Moreover, since Erdogan took office, infrastructure projects and facilities such as hospitals, factories, railways, and highways greatly improved. As a result, a large segment of the population gained access to better resources and services. This has somewhat equalized the economic disparity in the country, which has given Erdogan legitimacy and allowed him to win nearly a dozen elections in a row. As such, his supporters feel that he has earned the right to govern the way he wants. However, in the last decade, Erdogan has also grown more authoritarian. He has brought the military to heel, destroyed any semblance of an independent media, and purged the bureaucracy. The ruling party also cracked down on civil liberties and political opponents, including secularists, nationalists, leftists, liberals, and minorities. Although these belong to different political camps, they are united in their opposition to Erdogan. Moreover, the struggle between the divergent opposition and the government has deeply polarized the Turkish society. Roughly half the nation, who has been lifted from poverty, adores the president, while the other half, which lost civil liberties, loathes him. Although the fault line between the two groups is rooted in the geographic layout of the country, both sides reinforce the vulnerabilities of the other. But for the public, there is very little ground in the middle. This rivalry also shows that although Turkey is less secular than in the past, the society is also less religious. In any case, as the domestic political landscape transformed, Ankara began redefining its relationship with its old patron, the United States. The secular military maintained its pro-American stance, while the ruling party was unwilling to go along with Washington's regional policies. Erdogan's failure to fully back the American coalition against ISIS soured relations with the West. And before long, Ankara became entangled in events in Syria, Iraq, the Balkans, the Caucasus, and the Black Sea. Policymakers from the ruling party believe that they must make the most of Turkey's geography and that the country must retake its seat as the leader of the Islamic world. As such, Ankara is forging a new multi-vector policy that places the country as a political bridge between Russia and the United States, between Europe and Asia, between the Arabs and Israel, and overall as the mediator in the post-Sykes-Picot landscape. To accomplish this, Turkey must distance itself from current allies and set up channels with old rivals. For instance, Ankara has invested significant resources to bolster its soft power in a number of countries that share a multitude of cultural, historic, ethnic, and linguistic ties with Turkey. With the Middle East, the Turks share strong cultural links through common religious beliefs. As such, Turkey has deployed military resources to Qatar, Somalia, and Sudan. It has also made political and economic commitments to Tunisia and Libya. This policy of soft power extends to Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Balkans as well. In this context, Erdogan is the most consequential leader in Turkey, second only to Ataturk. By exploiting the polarized political arena, he has profoundly altered the prospects of the nation. This is not necessarily a trend that is exclusive to Turkey, since far-right politicians often polarize their own societies for political gains. But taken together, Turkey is a geopolitical paradox. While the Marmara heartland is wealthy, innovative, and extrovert, Anatolia by comparison remains underprivileged, conservative, and introvert. Both regions compete and cooperate with one another, and this internal contradiction sits at the heart of the geopolitical mindset of Turkey. This was a Caspian report by Mishirvan. Special thanks to our top members on Patreon who made this analysis possible. If you want to help our channel to remain independent and self-sustained, visit patreon.com/CaspianReport for more information on our crowdfunding platform. You can also make one-time donations by cryptocurrencies. See the screen or the description for our Ether and Bitcoin addresses. In any case, thank you for your time and Sahol.